Hi, welcome back to Code Catalyst Academy. Today we're going to be talking about two very important concepts, and those are conditional statements and loops. Okay, so as a quick preface, what we've learned is good, it's useful, but sometimes we just want to make our code smarter. And how do we do this? Well, one, we can use conditional statements. Basically, they can be used to create alternate pathways for your code to execute based on certain conditions within that you set in the code. And you can also use loops, which basically repeat a certain section of code a dynamic number of times based on a certain condition, and basically whether that condition is true or false. So, one of the most fundamental of these two, one of the most fundamental, or like the fundamental conditional statement is the if-else statement. So basically, the if-else statement is if like you think about grammar, you use like if then, like if I do this, then something will happen, and that's exactly what an if-else statement is. So basically, it evaluates the condition inside the parentheses. So if num is less than 6, then it will return num plus 10. If this is not true, then it goes to the else if statement. You could have as many else if statements as you want. So basically, the if else statement, the if statement really, just it starts at the if, then it goes in order through all of the else ifs. If this isn't true, if this is true, or yeah, if the condition is true, then it won't evaluate any of the else if or else statements. Okay, yeah. So it evaluates the else if statement if num is greater than 6, then it will return num plus 20 essentially. Else. The else statement is basically if none of the previous conditions are true. So what number is not less than 6, but is also not greater than 6? Well, it's 6. So this will return uh, 36, essentially. It will return 6 since num has to equal 6 plus 30, so 36. And yeah, why not, let's just experiment with some stuff. So we could, why not use the scanner class? Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to import java.util.scanner. That just gets us the scanner class. So we want to create a new scanner object, system.in, and then we can do int value equals integer dot value of, and we're using the wrapper class, so this will convert the string, and now this will just convert our string input, since the input is always going to be a string. It'll convert this string, the input, into an integer value using the integer wrapper class. And then if we want to do if value is greater than 5, then we can do return, or we'll just print it out actually. System.out.println is greater than 5. Else if, so remember, if this condition isn't fulfilled, if it's not true, then the statement will automatically evaluate the else if statement. So else if value is less than 5, and then else. If none of the previous uh, uh, if or else if statements are true, then it will automatically go to the else statement, which there is no condition because no other condition is true. So this is just, yeah, this is basically just your default if none of these are true. So, and your number must be 5 if it's not less than or greater than 5. So, yeah, we'll just from the terminal Java day 6. So if we just do 5, your number must be 5. And if we just run it again, 4, your input is less than 5. So if we think about it, when we're putting in 5, 5 is not greater than 5. So it's evaluated. It doesn't fulfill that, so it doesn't print this out. If yeah, and then we go on to here, 5 is not less than 5, so it doesn't evaluate this. It doesn't print out this statement. So it automatically goes to this and it just prints this out. Yeah, so that's how it works. And yeah, that's pretty simple. And if we just want a single line, if we're just printing out or returning like a single line of like text, essentially, we we technically don't have to have brackets. The brackets are used when you have like multiple pieces of like uh, code within like an if statement that you like want to execute in an if else statement. If you're only like evaluating one piece of code like this, you can just use this syntax. Basically, you just have your if, your condition, and then your code with a semicolon at the end, else if condition, code with semicolon at the end, and then else with uh, your code, and then your semicolon at the end. So yeah, this is just a good thing to know that like the brackets that we showed earlier, like even like this within the public static void main string args, and also within like the class in general is used just to block statements together. Yeah, and we'll actually do it. Yeah, we'll just run it again from pile again since the code is different, obviously. 5, it'll just return the same thing. So yeah, that's just how it works. So yeah, pretty simple, fundamental. It is very fundamental though. Yeah, and here's what we covered. It will it'll just then you don't need parentheses as seen below. Yeah, you can just see that it's just returning less than 10, return greater than or equal to 10, since it's only one line. Okay, and switch statements. So sometimes you have a lot of like if and else if conditions, and at some point it just gets too slow, like they're diminishing returns. So it's just better just to use something called a switch statement. Basically, the switch statement, it takes in like a value, and then you have like basically a bunch of cases. It's basically like a bunch of if statements essentially, but they're called cases. And their syntax is like this case, the number, or like whatever you have inside of the parentheses for the switch statement, then your colon, and then you just have it do something. And you also usually have to add just break at the end of yeah, but sometimes you have to have the break at the end of each case. So yeah, it'll just evaluate whether value is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it'll just do something with those numbers. So if we just go here, why not do oh, switch value, hold on, what's this? Uh, mm, case 1, then it'll just system.out. Okay, and to save time, I'll just do that. Yeah. In this case, we shouldn't. I don't think we shouldn't add a break, just so we can close our scanner. Yeah, and we'll just add 2 cases because we just want to save time. Mm-hmm. And, oh, okay, well, that failure. And then yeah, once that's no, yeah, oh yeah, and then we have to scanner.close. Yeah, again, uh, as we mentioned in the last video, if you don't close it, it'll just uh, emit like an error. 2 and then number 2. Yeah, so it's just in this case, it's not really you don't see as much of a benefit, but as you have like larger more conditions and like you want to have more varied responses to those different conditions, switch statements have more value. Uh, but yeah, we don't have really time to evaluate that. But yeah, usually not in this case, but usually you'll just add the break and that'll just break out of the program. So yeah, or whatever. Yeah, we'll just yeah, but in this case, we're just not going to do that right now. Yeah, remember, usually you're just going to have to use the break. But since we have the scanner.close, we just want to keep that there. So, yeah. And remember, yeah, for big if-else statements, it's just better just to use a switch statement. Okay, the default keyword. So the default keyword is basically when you have a switch statement and let's say your input, in this case, the variable day, it doesn't fit any of the cases. So it'll automatically default to this. It's basically exactly like an else statement. Not a good, yeah, an else statement. If neither of if none of the previous conditions are true, then you just automatically run that. You just automatically run the default keyword. And if we just do default, system.out println not 1 or 2. Then yeah, we'll just do it again from here. Or not 1 or 2. Yeah, it just automatically goes to here if none of the pre-existing conditions are true. Yeah, no break statement is needed since it's the last statement. So yeah, and yeah, the break statements are basically needed just for so it doesn't evaluate the other ones. So it just breaks out of that statement. So yeah, and then while and do while loop. So here's where we're talking about loops. So the while loop is basically it basically does a certain piece, performs like a certain piece of code while a certain condition is true. Yeah, it executes this function repeatedly, and yeah, you can just see it here. It just has that syntax, while condition inside of the parentheses, while I is less than 5. Then we have our brackets to indicate that we just have our statement here, and then it'll just print out I, and then we increment I after every iteration essentially. So yeah, int I equals 0. Why not? Oh, yeah, we can delete that later. I is less than 6. System dot out dot println I plus plus. Boom. Yeah, 0 all the way up into 5 because that's the last integer that's less than 6. So yeah, starts out at 0, increments to 1, increments to 2, increments to 3, increments to 4, increments to 6. So it runs this code repeatedly until I is less than 6. And then the do while loop, it basically does the same exact thing as the while loop, but it executes the statement, then evaluates whether like a certain condition is true. So we can just do a certain piece of code, n I plus plus while basically I is less than 6. So it'll just oh yeah, yeah, and it just executed the same thing. If we just want to print 6, we just go up to 7. Yeah, it's pretty simple. That's just do while. They basically do the same thing. The while loop and the do while loop do the same thing, but the do while loop, basically just it executes the statement, then evaluates whether the condition is true. And then for loops are used for uh, iterating through code a certain amount of times. Yeah, and you can see that the code below will iterate starting at 1 up to and not including 20. It'll include like 1 all the way up to like 19, but it won't print out 20. And syntax for a for loop is like this. And let's say we start at 0, I is less than 20, post increment system.out.println, and then I'll just print out that. Yeah, just does this. So this basically your condition, you basically repeat this code, you iterate through this code really up until this condition is not true. Yeah. And then here you have your increment, and here you just define like a variable to iterate through. It's pretty simple. This for loop, remember, it's just again used for iterating through code, a known amount of times. And then nested for loop, it's yeah, we took this out, but it's basically when you put a for loop inside of another for loop or nest it, and it does use more computing power and takes longer than a normal for loop because you basically have to yeah, you're just yeah, because you're putting two for loops together and you have this, it's called like O of n squared essentially, because so it uses more computing power since you have to iterate through all of like the items essentially like 2 times over essentially. So yeah, and here we just have a selection, an example. It's just like a basic sorting algorithm, selection sort. Uh, it's a bit complex for now, but yeah, this is just a simple idea. And the inner conditions are based off of the outer conditions. So yeah, that's just a nested for loop. And yeah, why not? Let's actually do an example right now. Let's actually create a multi-dimensional array. Nums equals mm, 5. Then we'll just do 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. Yeah. And then for int I equals 0, I is less than plus, and then for, it's going to be based on the outer loop too, so it's just going to be int j, for example. That's I and j and k are really common common variables used for loops like while loops and for loops as well. So I is less than nums, and then we just want j less than nums I. So it's gonna take in it's gonna evaluate like if I is equal to 1, it's going to evaluate the second array here, or the first indexed or the array that occupies the first index. So yeah, and then we have to do length j plus plus. And then we can just print, um, or actually we could just do, if we want to do, just print it out all in a line nicely, we could do this nums I. Remember, the first bracket is the row or the specific array that you want to access. J is the specific element. Then we can do, yeah, then we'll print out that first row, and then we can, we'll just use our escape character. It's not super necessary, but we can just do that. And then, yeah, we'll just do that. That's cool. That's one use of nested for loops. Really cool. And then for each loops. For each loops are just used for cycling through arrays specifically. And so basically, instead of having like all of this, where like I, it's just like a normal integer. This will and then it's used to access like an element in an array. In an array, we can just have a for each loop, which is more specified for arrays. It's designed for arrays essentially. Uh, nums just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. Then we want I. Here's the that's the syntax, and then system out.println I. And you don't so it's basically I represents all of the like a single element in nums. It doesn't represent like the index that you're trying to get. It represents the actual element. So you remove like, oh, I want to get nums.I from the equation. You remove that part of it. That's cool. It just makes it more concise, I suppose. And yeah, it just does that. Yeah, that's for each loop. Remember, this is the syntax, and I just represents like 13, 14, 15. It doesn't represent the index like 0, 1, or 2. So yeah. And that about covers it. I know this was a longer lesson, but hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, have a good day.